Listen to the brutal truth about your constant, desperate need to be seen. You walk around this world believing that your constant presence makes you important. You reply to every message within seconds. You post every mundane detail of your life on the internet, and you show up to every meaningless social gathering because you are absolutely terrified of being forgotten. But let me tell you the harsh, uncompromising reality of basic economics and human psychology. Scarcity creates massive value, and abundance creates absolute worthlessness. Because you are constantly available, you have made yourself completely cheap. You are a basic commodity that can be accessed by anyone at any given time. Kings, emperors, and the men who actually rule this world do not stand in the crowded, noisy marketplace begging for cheap attention. They rule from the absolute, terrifying silence of the high castle. When you are everywhere, you are essentially nowhere. Every single time you update your status or seek validation from the crowd, you are desperately shouting into the digital void, begging the matrix to acknowledge your existence. This constant accessibility is a terminal disease of the modern fragile ego. You have convinced yourself that if you step away, the world will somehow collapse, but the humiliating truth is that the world will simply move on without you. You are deeply addicted to the cheap dopamine of immediate social feedback, and this pathetic addiction is actively destroying your capacity to do any deep, monumental work. The legendary men of history, the conquerors, the brilliant philosophers, and the massive empire builders did not construct their legacies while constantly chatting with the crowd. They disappeared into the wilderness, into the study, or into the dark mountains. They understood that to forge a weapon of absolute destruction, you need the intense, concentrated heat of isolation. Right now, you are entirely deluded. Your focus is shattered into 1,000 tiny, useless pieces spread across digital platforms and meaningless conversations. You must aggressively shatter this illusion of importance. You need to understand that the crowd is a massive parasitic organism that actively feeds on your attention. They want you to stay engaged. They want you to stay distracted, and they desperately want you to remain exactly on their mediocre level because your potential growth absolutely terrifies them. If you disappear and actually focus on building your empire, it forces them to look in the cold, dark mirror at their own pathetic lack of discipline. You wake up and immediately plug your brain into the collective noise, allowing the chaotic thoughts of millions of weak individuals to hijack your mental frequency. This is the behavior of a domesticated animal. To break this cycle, you must become extremely comfortable with the idea of being completely forgotten. Your constant presence is a massive vulnerability, and it is time to turn the lights out. To execute this monumental transformation, you must initiate the ghost protocol. This is not a temporary weekend, vacation, or a superficial social media detox. This is a brutal, systematic severing of all non-essential external ties. Disappearing for 6 months means you become an absolute phantom to the world that currently knows. You must ruthlessly cut off the endless supply of cheap validation. No more posting your life, no more explaining your grand plans, and no more negotiating your rigid boundaries with people who hold absolutely no authority over your destiny. The weak people in your life will not understand this at all. They will call you arrogant, they will call you depressed, and they will try to drag you back into the noisy arena of mediocrity using emotional guilt and cheap manipulation. You must view their desperate, pathetic attempts not as a reason to return, but as the ultimate glory's confirmation that your withdrawal is actually working. When you first step into the shadows, the absolute silence will be completely deafening. You will experience severe psychological withdrawal symptoms because your brain has been deeply wired to crave the constant chaotic buzzing of the hive mind. Your fragile ego will violently scream for attention. It will beg you to check your phone to send a simple message to remind the world that you still exist. You must absolutely crush that pathetic urge without mercy. You must sit in the heavy, uncomfortable silence until it stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like absolute, untouchable freedom. In this silence, you will finally hear your own authentic thoughts. The ghost protocol is a brutal, unyielding process of psychological purification. You are taking your brain completely offline, taking it out of the chaotic digital marketplace and placing it into a high-security vault. You must treat your attention as the most valuable, scarce resource in the entire universe. Every single second you spend observing the meaningless lives of others is a second you have stolen from the construction of your own permanent empire. Disappearing means you completely stop being a consumer of the matrix and you transition into a silent, invisible architect. You will wake up in the dark. You will execute your daily duty with terrifying, relentless precision, and you will go to sleep without telling a single soul about your victories or your brutal struggles. You will become a monolithic machine, operating entirely in the shadows, fueled by your own internal, unshakable will rather than the cheap applause of the crowd. This level of total isolation requires a terrifying amount of discipline, but it is the only way to completely reset your dopamine receptors and rebuild your mind from the ground up when there's absolutely nobody around to praise you for your hard work. You quickly discover what you are made of. The Ghost Protocol forces you to confront the raw, unedited reality. Embrace the shadows and let them forget you. When you step fully into the shadows and commit to this brutal 6-month isolation, you will immediately trigger the attrition of the weak. The beautiful, liberating truth about disappearing is that it automatically and completely cleanses your environment of emotional parasites. You will quickly discover that 99% of the people you considered close friends were merely acquaintances of convenience. They were only around because you were constantly available to entertain them, to listen to their endless, pathetic complaining, or to validate their miserable existence. When you violently cut off the free supply of your energy, they will simply vanish and rapidly find another host to drain. Do not mourn the loss of these weak connections for a single second. Their departure is not a tragedy. It is a massive, absolutely necessary purge. In the dark, isolated forge of your own mind, you will be forced to confront your actual demons. Without the constant, chaotic distraction of the crowd, you can no longer run away from your deepest insecurities, your massive character flaws, and your hidden fears. Will come face to face with the exact brutal reasons why you have been failing, and you will not be able to blame the system, the economy, or anyone else. This is the crucible. The heat in this psychological forge will be absolutely agonizing, but it is specifically designed to burn away all the soft, pathetic impurities in your character. You must willingly endure this psychological fire. You must let the weak, fragile version of yourself be completely reduced to gray ash. Every time you push through a brutal workout in absolute silence, every time you study or build your business at 3 in the morning while the rest of the world is unconscious, you're hammering a new piece of solid iron onto your soul. You are replacing the fragile glass shield of external validation with heavy, impenetrable titanium armor. The modern weak world tells you that isolation is incredibly dangerous, that you need a supportive community, and that you constantly need to express your feelings to the group. Absolute, unshakable power is born exclusively in absolute solitude. The apex predator does not hunt in a massive, noisy herd. He hunts entirely alone in the dark, calculating every single move with cold, clinical precision. You are using this 6-month period to fundamentally rewire your biological operating system. You are teaching your primitive brain to find deep, sustainable satisfaction in the brutal execution of the work itself, rather than the fleeting, unpredictable applause of the audience. Let the weak fall away and entirely embrace the heavy, glorious burden of total self-reliance. You have completely removed yourself from the chessboard while they are busy destroying their minds with trivial drama and cheap entertainment. You are quietly accumulating power in the darkness. The forge is hot, the hammer is heavy, and you are the only blacksmith allowed inside. Keep striking the iron in absolute silence. The massive reality of your success will scream louder than any words you could possibly say. You will simply exist in the light, and execute in the shadows. The final phase of this monumental protocol is not about making a loud, arrogant comeback. It is about the cold, undeniable emergence of a completely new entity. After 6 months of brutal, uncompromising isolation and relentless execution in the shadows, you do not return to the world to beg for its attention. You do not post a triumphant status update or desperately try to show everyone how much you have changed. That is the exact behavior of a man who is still secretly a slave to the opinions of the crowd. When you truly complete the ghost protocol, your return is silent, heavy, and absolutely terrifying to those who knew. The old pathetic version of you will step back into the light, operating on a completely different psychological frequency. The petty things that used to trigger your anger will barely even register on your radar. The weak people whose approval you used to desperately crave will suddenly seem incredibly small, irrelevant, and entirely pathetic. You will look directly into the eyes of the crowd, and you will see right through their fragile, insecure masks. Because you have successfully conquered the absolute darkness of your own mind, the chaotic noise of the external world can no longer penetrate your fortress. You will walk into a room and the atmosphere will physically change because you are carrying the immense, undeniable weight of unshakable discipline. You are no longer trying to convince anyone of your power, because true power never needs to loudly announce itself. It simply exists as a monolithic force of nature. The weak people who fell away during your isolation will inevitably try to crawl back when they see the massive empire you have silently constructed. They will desperately try to pull you back into their trivial drama, but they will quickly realize they are speaking to a massive stone wall. You have built a psychological barrier so thick that their mediocre vibrations simply bounce off into the void. You have achieved the ultimate state of freedom. You are completely and terrifyingly self-contained. Your happiness, your relentless motivation, and your absolute sense of self-worth are entirely generated from within your own iron core. You have starved your fragile ego of cheap praise, gaining the absolute superpower of complete self-mastery. You have successfully weaponized your absence to completely destroy the weak man you used to be, and now you stand as the untouchable architect of your own destiny. The Matrix can no longer read your moves. The system can no longer control your emotions. You have successfully disappeared from the radar of the mediocre, and you have emerged as a shadow emperor. Keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, and let the brutal, undeniable results of your silent labor crush anyone who ever doubted you. You do not ever need to speak again.